And so this is where the opposite comes in. The James Long theory of emotion suggests that our autonomic nervous systems are constantly monitoring the environment. And this creates slight deltas in our physiology, things like slight changes in our blood pressure, our heart rate, our levels of adrenaline, and so forth. And because of our understanding of the environment in which we're experiencing these physiological changes, we interpret those changes as emotion, as our mood. And this is where I can play the designer card. All of this talk about emotion and design isn't meant to prove or disprove any theory of emotion. Rather, it's for designers to have a robust framework in which to think about how to elicit emotions, especially in an age where emotion is a key factor in the success or failure of a design. So, going back to our bear in the woods example, according to the James Long theory of emotion, I'm walking through the woods and my autonomic nervous system encounters a large menacing object. And as a result, my body then experiences a rush of adrenaline, my heart rate goes up, I start sweating, and I have the sense that I need to run. And in that split second, all of this is happening in a split second, that I recognize that that object is a bear. Then the conclusion that I draw, not being a bear trainer at the circus, but just being a designer, the conclusion that I draw is this physiological change is fear. So are you with me? This is totally opposite. That I experience this physiological change and I draw a conclusion about the environment or the context in which I experience this, and I label that change as fear. The seminal work for this kind of approach to emotion is this study called the High Bridge Study, and it was done in the 70s. And in it, Aaron and Dutton had this experiment where there's this rope bridge that was suspended high over a gorge. And they had two groups of young male graduate students, and the grad students were asked to cross the bridge one by one. And also there was a young, attractive actress who was playing the role of the lab assistant. And in the first condition of the experiment, as the young male graduate student would cross the bridge, on the other side of the bridge, the ostensible lab assistant then asked all these questions about his experience crossing the bridge. How did it feel? What was it like? And so forth. And then, unknown to the participant, she would then pretend to flirt with him and strongly suggest that he call her up so that they could meet later for a date. And in the second condition is the exact same thing, except the actress met the participant halfway across the bridge. Well, in the first group, the ones that met her after crossing the bridge, they described the experience as fearful, anxiety-causing, not a pleasant thing. And some less than a quarter of them actually ended up calling the telephone number, only to be disappointed by receiving the secretary at the psychology department. But in the second condition, the ones that met her halfway across, they actually described their experience as thrilling and exciting and adventurous. And more than 2/3 of them actually ended up making the same fateful call. And the point of that is that they experienced the same physiological factors, but their interpretation of that experience was very different, even though the same physical stimulus was practically identical. The emotional outcome were two ends of a spectrum. There's another example where a race car driver was strapped with biometric equipment, and he drove his car in a race. And the output of that equipment was shown to a panel of doctors without being told the context of it. And they were asked, well, diagnose this patient. And the doctor said, your patient is suffering from a panic attack. And again, that's just based purely on the physiology without the context of the situation. But the driver actually had a very positive experience driving the race car in that race. Well, this is where it starts trying to get practical. I was thinking about, okay, well, this kind of framework, this cognitive appraisal approach of emotion, how does this apply to design? Well, it turns out that one of my friends works in the video game section of Microsoft Games. And there was a really successful video game called Halo. And in it, the team that developed this actually used a very similar approach that kind of confirmed this emotional theory. And it's a framework called mechanics, dynamics, and aesthetics. And here's the academic citation if you're interested. But basically, this framework starts off in it's three levels, and it starts off first with this notion of mechanics. And the idea of mechanics are binary relationships, dichotomous relationships. In fact, it's a one-on-one relationship between some part of a system and the user. And so, like in a game of chess, the mechanics of chess include things like the pieces, the rules, the chessboard, and so forth. And in a product like a car, the mechanics are things like how the steering wheel feels when you turn it, or the knobs and the buttons, or how it feels when you push a pedal. Again, just these one-on-one relationships. Well, the thing is, there's a second level called dynamics. As mechanics start interacting with each other, and we introduce the human into this experience, then there ends up being this kind of emergent quality where when people bring their own experiences and their own histories into encountering a thing, it creates a dynamic. So another example, back to the chess example, the rules of chess have been the same for centuries, yet no two chess games have exactly been the same. And the same thing with a car. Again, the mechanical qualities of a car tend to be pretty much the same framework, but our experience with different cars is this kind of emergent quality. And so what happens is when dynamics start interacting with each other, it creates the aesthetic. And the aesthetic is where the emotion occurs. It's how we feel, or when we drive, or when we play the game of chess, and so forth. And these form a kind of directional stack where from people experiencing the design or experiencing the product, they're most aware of the aesthetics first, and then they become increasingly aware of the dynamics and then the mechanics. Like, we immediately know how something makes us feel. Yet from a designer standpoint, we're most aware of the reverse. We're keenly aware of the mechanics, what type we choose, what colors we choose, the kind of paper